Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we'll make a double-sided UV printer jig. Now this is actually the last video I do with this machine. This machine's off to a better home, and I'm getting another one in the shop that has more of everything, basically. So the kind of work I'm getting more and more of is actually very high precision work. And this machine is awesome, keeps complete tolerances, and I'll show that to you right now. So the goal, obviously, is for guitar picks. So the goal with this is to be within 0.02 millimeters, plus or minus. So this, the depth here, is 0.73 millimeters. So you can see here, I measured it earlier. So I'm plus or minus, on average, on both sides, plus minus 0.02 millimeters. There's a little bit of variance here and there, and the reason for that is because this is just MDF. This is the prototype. Once this is approved by the customer, we're going to production to make these out of Delrin. And then later on, again, this will happen with the other machine, the Delrin, and then after that, also aluminum, depending on how many volume requirements that they have. So the nice thing about making stuff like this here is that it's double-sided, but it's also a challenge. And the biggest challenge I had was, how do you hold this down now that it's full of holes without pins for double-sided. So normally when you do double-sided stuff, you get the router to make 4 holes, you put pins on the table, you have the router draw out the holes for the pins, then you just go like this, you line up the pins. I didn't want that. I wanted a jig without any pins. I guess technically I could use these for pins too, but I don't know. I like doing things the hard way for some reason. So what I did is I actually just use this. Now what is this? This is actually chalk. I'm doing a course in welding. I started in September, full-time course, and I'll be done the first year very, very soon. And one thing I learned from welding is that you use welder's chalk. It's probably not the right name for it, but that's what I call it. And this is exactly ½ an inch in thickness, if you put it this way, of course. So because this is ½ an inch, and the bit that I use here, I'll point to it, that carves this out of the MDF is exactly ½ an inch. That means that once I make the hole, as you'll see in the MDF, I just put this in all 4 sides, and I basically have a rigid, XYZ way to hold this down. It applies just enough pressure on all the sides, because it is MDF. It does have a little bit of give when you machine it. And with the vacuum table, it sucks it down and it holds it there. And it blew my mind when I tried it, and it actually worked wonderfully. Although I'm releasing this video in May, I actually did this a couple months ago. I could tell right away because the machine that you see doing the work with the UV printing jig is no longer in the shop. I sold it off, and I bought a bigger machine that fills up even more of the shop. For this case here, it was a 2-sided jig that we ended up making for the customer. And the tolerances and everything were dead on. It was perfect. It was quite impressive, especially with 2-sided machining. The issue is that they needed to adjust things by fractions of a degree on their UV printing table. And that's very hard to do if you have one solid jig. So our solution to that, a couple months down the road, is actually you have to have a two-part jig. So one that screws into the other, but it allows the customer to adjust things very, very slightly for a perfect UV printing production at their end. Now the nice thing about using MDF is it's very cost effective. Our goal here was to make an MDF version of it, get it approved by the customer, and then move on to Delrin. What we're doing now is actually, we did a couple of UV printing jigs like this here for them, and now we're moving on to probably HDPE instead of Delrin. What happened during the last couple of years is that prices for materials have skyrocketed, and they never went back down. Maybe 2x4s, went from $4 a 2x4 to 12, and now they're down back to 4. But with plastics and metals, they didn't move that much. The suppliers realized they could make a lot of money by charging a lot of money, and that's what they kept doing. They didn't bring the price down. So that's why we're moving probably to HDPE. We're still figuring things out. when it comes to, you know, the final material we're going to use for this stuff. But HDP is dramatically cheaper than Delrin and has very similar qualities for UV printing purposes. And of course we need a black. So the nice thing about these kind of jigs here is that we can literally make them out of any shape, any size, and any material. So that means if you wanted a jig like this that was 5 feet by 10 feet, well, that's the size of this bed, and it'll be the size of the next machine coming into the shop. So you have complete give. You'll have about 9 inches of clearance. So let's say you wanted to make this thing out of, I don't know what it would be, just, you know, 8 inches tall. We could do that just as easily. So looking for custom jigs for your printer or shop or what have you, we can make them for you out of metal, wood, plastic, and aluminum soon. Contact me at CNCKing.com. We'll make them for you and ship them right to your door.